Daftaboutcraft, the craft beer podcast.
Well, every now and again at Daftaboutcraft, we like to provide you with some bonus content, and here is one of those extra episodes. You can catch the next full Daftaboutcraft coming your way at the end of November. Well, it's time to head to East Sussex now for a chat with one of the team at a brewery excelling with not only beers, but their alcohol-free range, together with sodas, kombucha. Welcome to the podcast, Ben, Sales Director, and one of the faces behind Only with Love Brewery. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good, thanks, Dave. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, we're all right. Before we go any further, I should just say how I know Ben, because I met him recently at Craft Brew Festival in Bristol. I sort of cornered him and asked him to come on the podcast, and he very kindly agreed.
Yeah, I kind of felt like I didn't have much choice when you're kind of in a corner and you're like, be on the podcast. No, I'm kidding. No, it's great to be here.
The thing is when you just send an Instagram message to somebody blind and saying, hi, I'm on a podcast, do you want to come on? It's easy for them to duck it, but when you're face to face, it's a lot more difficult to swerve.
Yeah, I can't deny that.
So you are Sales Director for Only with Love. How long have you been involved with the business?
So I joined Only with Love at the start of June last year. So it's been a year and a summer now. So not all that long, really. Yeah, like prior to that, I'd been working for another brewery in Sussex who I think you'd probably come across on the festival circuit, 360 Degree Brew Co.
Yes, indeed.
So I'd been there for about 3 years before I then got invited to come and join the team over at Only with Love. So yes, I've been working in the beer industry now for about nearly 4.5 years now in total.
So you got involved in COVID times, which is one of the themes we find with the podcast. So many breweries sort of took that entrepreneurial step.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I kind of got very lucky in all things considered, because prior to COVID, I'd been, trying to live every person's dream of not being an adult for as long as possible. I was away in Canada doing a couple of ski seasons over in Whistler, and then obviously when something in the world stopped, and you've got a visa that's running out, repatriation was the order of business. So yeah, after a couple of months without really much of a cause, I got very lucky. Got a job at 360 just after they'd had a change of ownership, so we're starting afresh. And kind of the rest has kind of been history. Everything about the job and the industry has just ticked boxes for me personally. I've had a huge opportunity to develop as a person as well through the time I've been working in the industry. But above all else, it's just a pure love of beer that's kind of really inspired me to, really push on and crack on with things and actually build a career for myself.
When did the passion for beer come around, and when did you decide you wanted to work in the industry? Because, when you're at school and you said the careers advisor, nobody ever says I want to work in the beer industry, do they?
No. I think people had me down as either being prime minister or a maths teacher when I was 16. I think it kind of came off the back of like a lot of folk, working in hospitality. Like I worked on bars during my time at uni, and then when I was over in Canada as well, I was working in a brew pub. So I think it had just kind of come from the general level of just enjoying getting drunk to begin with when I was a bit younger, to then starting to kind of go on a journey of discovering real ale whilst I was at uni. And this is obviously kind of like fairly formative times for the UK craft beer scene, but it was still, we had people like Shindigger and Freedom on in our student union in Manchester, and this was kind of just when Cloudwater had been coming to the fore. Coincidentally, there's been a real synergy for me in terms of my journey with skiing and beer, because like I'd been off and taken a somewhat impromptu trip to Argentina to go skiing one summer for us, one winter for them, and turned out like Bariloche in the Andes had this massive brew pub scene, and just I think kind of just being captivated by this idea that kind of no matter where in the world you go, you can sort of align that sense of adventure with these small producers globally creating awesome, tasty products. And it's kind of gone organically. And then once I then got this job, like I said, somewhat fortuitously, all things considered, given the way the world was in spring of 2020, I've just really just cracked on with it since. Nosedived further into it because of the more I've learnt, the bigger a nerd I've become in the process. So it's a real kind of organic level to it for me, really. It's just various layers of my personal interests and things have happened with me in my life and my experiences that have kind of put me to where I'm at now.
Do you find that beer almost takes over your life sometimes?
Somewhat, yeah. But, I think that's kind of something you learn over time in industry, right? You've got to find that fine balance between like what's work, what's play, when does it become too much, when can you kind of feel ready to kind of jump back in. And, there were certainly times, particularly when I was personally getting really into the swing of things when the pubs were reopening after lockdown, because that was, somewhat my first real stab at a proper market in sales. And it was at the same time that I'd moved to Brighton. Kind of every time I was going into pubs, I felt like I couldn't help but be prospecting everywhere, because everything was new, but from both sides of my life. But again, you kind of learn to manage that and I think case in point has been particular this summer. I've been a lot better at managing myself when it comes to the beer festival circuit, because in the past, I'd work these weekends, jump back into the regular 9 to 5, do another weekend, and I would just bank up all this time for like another trip somewhere else. But you learn, particularly there's a sense of it when you're working for a brewery that's so big on well-being, you really got to look after yourself when it comes to this kind of job, because beer can, like you said, overtake. It's about kind of drawing your own boundaries for yourself, I guess.
That's an interesting point, what you just said, actually, about well-being being a really important thing at Only With Love. It's one of the main ethoses of the business.
It is, yeah. From the get-go, when Steve and Rog set the brewery up, they wanted to look at it from a slightly different angle, actually making sure that well-being, whether it's kind of what you're consuming and the quantities and the qualities of it, but also kind of, what's around you, making sure that well-being is at the forefront of everyone's minds, because I think we often take it for granted. I think especially if we all think back to that time in the COVID era, well-being was a tough one for everyone to really make sure was something that was at the sort of the top of everything. It was all well and good everyone smashing dippers and imperial strength everything on cold, dark winter nights, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe not always the best thing from a health perspective, whether it's physical or mental. There's a lot that kind of came from that time when the brewery was set up, because Only With Love's only been around since late 2020. It was actually quite funny. Steve and Roger had gone to the pub to go and celebrate registering the company, and then the landlord had told them about half an hour later, oh well, sorry guys, you can't sell your beer, we're going into lockdown for a few months.
That is unfortunate, isn't it? Crikey. Did that then lead to a bit of a reshaping of the business? What happened at that point?
Well, from what I gathered, it kind of just gave them a bit of time to really get things up and running, start building out the infrastructure, getting the tanks in place, starting to work on the branding and working on like actually kind of putting in the business model ready to crack on with things once the pubs opened up. And obviously I can only kind of speak for what happened in those first few years from what I've had as hearsay from my colleagues and what I've seen from when I was in industry. But from the get-go, the impression of the brewery was, and it still is, very much looking after making sure that the alcohol-free product is there for everyone to see. There's always been this real personal thing for the guys to do good quality beer, whether it's full fat beer, as Roger likes to call it, or the AF stuff.
That's a lovely little segue into the AF, because I've just opened the award-winning alcohol-free beer that you have. Obviously, as you say, the guys that founded this has always been a thing for them. I think a lot of breweries have cottoned on to alcohol-free in maybe the last year to 18 months, but it sounds like Only With Love had it at the forefront of when they started. They were going to have alcohol-free and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like the whole mantra from the brewery from the offset was about trying to sort of build a slightly different outfit, almost go against the grain to some extent. The word kombucha is still often correlated with slightly more alternative living circles, and it's only kind of now just getting into the forefront of everyday lifestyle and everyday consumption. But, go back to even just 2020, if you were to say the word kombucha in the UK, most people would have raised an eyebrow at you. And it's about trying to make sure that there's healthy products for your slightly more mindful consumer, but all of it's to do with well-being. It's making sure that what's going into you is going to be stuff that's looking after you. That's kind of where we've got the kombucha stuff, as well as the hop sodas that we do. So with the hop sodas particularly, it's really trying to showcase the health benefits you get from hops as a plant. They're good for your guts, but they're also good for helping with your circadian sleep cycle. Similarly, the kombuchas, the acids and the bacteria that are created from the SCOBY are good for your guts. There's a lot of scientific data to prove that a healthy gut, with it being almost coined as the second brain of the body, helps the rest of your system to function. There had been a certain point where the guys were seriously considering going down that route exclusively, but as time's gone on, you can only really think of maybe one or two names, like a Mash Gang or a Lucky Saint, for example, where someone who's solely alcohol-free has managed to make the business model work at a grand scale. But I think it kind of just goes in tandem with the recipe development that's happened, particularly in the last sort of 12 months with us. And a lot of that's kind of down to colleague John, who's been our head brewer since, spring, summertime last year. And he's come from a home brewing background. And, the work that he's done has kind of just let the brand and the business organically realign itself to have both the alcohol-free and the regular stuff, because the market has just responded so well to what we've been producing.
So what sort of percentage does the sodas and alcohol-free production make up of the business compared to the beer?
It's very, very small. A lot of that is down to the fact that, particularly when it comes to something like a hop soda, a lot of the UK market doesn't really know a lot about what this is. Yeah. You've got to have a lot of marketing budget and sales resource, particularly time, to go and do that educational piece. Yeah, it's been a fine balancing act trying to fit everything in pretty much all calendar year, really.
It's certainly a growing market as well, the soft drink side of things and the alcohol-free. Everywhere I go now, you look in the fridges and most breweries have got some sort of alcohol-free offering there.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've noticed comparing, this like calendar year compared to last. There's been a huge uptick in the amount of product in the market. And, it was like a rather interesting thing that we noticed because we send our small pack off for pasteurization and suddenly we were finding it really hard to book our regular pasteurization slots with the lead time we've been working on previously. That's just down to the fact that there's been so much demand from the industry to be using these kind of services for shelf stability. It's like, oh, wow, okay, well, yeah, that kind of adds further weight to what you see and what you feel. But it's definitely growing. I think whether it's folk who are looking to cut back or balance, or like zebra drinkers it's kind of coined, or whether it's your new generation of drinkers in Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I mean, particularly with these latter two demographics, you've got, I think the statistics are showing about 30% of these young adults where they've hit at 18, drinking age, continue to abstain from alcohol. But nonetheless, they still want to go out and have a nice time with their friends, enjoy tasty beverages, but just minus the booze. And, it's important, I think, not just for us, but for anyone in the industry to try and stay on top of trends and try and sort of see where the future is, because, it's all well and good putting out a multitude of Citra pale ales, but, you've got to try and find a way to cut through the noise eventually, or at least keep up with what people are actually asking for.
I'm not someone who seeks out much alcohol-free beer. It's not that I don't mind it, I just generally don't go for it. But I can see why this has won awards. This is, it sounds really stupid, but this is like drinking a beer with no alcohol. And I mean that in the sense that you can have other ones which I find taste quite sweet, or they taste very lacking in flavour at the back end especially, and it goes very thin and sort of non-existent. You sort of think, well, I should have just had a soft drink rather than trying to substitute beer, but this actually genuinely works. So this is a GCAF Mango, I should say, but your sort of flagship one, it feels like. Yeah,
we kind of made a decision at the start of the year to start trying to toy with the idea of building like an umbrella brand around GCAF as a moniker, because then, you can kind of fit in GCAF such and such, such and such, such and such. We've done, across the year, we've done like an Aussie Pale, an American Pale, a New Zealand Pale, a West Coast Pale IPA. Just recently released a tropical one as well, but it's all kind of stems from the Mango, which was originally a redux of a previous beer that's now no longer in the range, called Reboot. And the whole idea of being like take the concept of what the beer is, strip it down to its basic parts, but not compromise on the quality of it as well. And that's the key thing for me. Like, whether people, for whatever reason, folk are choosing to abstain from drinking, or even if it's just as simple as being designated driver, you still want to have that same experience of craft, whether you're drinking booze or not booze. You want to have like a multi-sensory experience, whether it's kind of the aromas or the taste, particularly the body. I've drank a fair share of alcohol-free for market research purposes, and you get a massive inconsistency with body. It's super important for us to make sure that quality is at the forefront of everything that we're doing.
It's a really interesting point you make, actually, about the soft drink side of things. For people who are going to tap rooms and bars and maybe they're driving, when you go to somewhere and the designated driver has only got Coke or lemonade to choose from, that really hacks people off. I know that my wife would tell you that. So if she can be part of the experience and have something that tastes still alcoholic and has got all the aromas and everything else, that's wonderful.
It'd be a really good one to just test on people as a placebo and just see if anyone would. I think not hardened, but experienced drinkers would probably pick up on the fact it's alcohol free. I think if you sort of gave it to a casual crowd, I'd be interested to see how many people would pick up on it.
I've done it a couple of times when I've done tastings, and it was, eventually maybe like the fifth or sixth person, when you're kind of asking people to call out what they think might eventually get it, and then everyone suddenly perks up and it's like, oh, hang about. Maybe it is actually alcohol-free once someone's actually called it out to the room. But you're totally right. It stood up really, really well in blind testing. It's been really, really funny to see it, actually, because, I think someone reckoned it was about 5.5%.
Oh, wow.
I almost gave it away with my smile while trying to keep a poker face when they said that.
Do you get people who, in the same way that beer fanatics like us will buy every beer from a brewery, do you get people who buy every alcohol-free beer from you?
We do, yeah. What's been really special is we've had a really solid bank of community support from day one. Only with Love is, it's not got any massive private equity or anything behind it. It all began from, like friends of friends and close angel investors. In order for people to do that and invest their hard-earned cash into a small startup, they've got to really believe in it and also have, a sense of connection to it as well. And so, these folk are, for whatever reason, are predominantly drinking less alcohol. And every time we've got a new beer out, they're coming to get it. Forgetting that close-knit community we built around the brewery. You're just going into pubs. There's a couple. I live in Brighton and got a bunch of pubs that have made an alcohol-free line permanency. We've got a regular part of those rotations. In some places, we've got permanent lines ourselves. I'll be in there drinking all sorts, and I'll see different people going up and asking, "Oh, what's the latest alcohol-free you got?" And it's really heartening to see that. I personally also did a little bit of dry Jan. This beer called Putty got in the way of that. You might have heard of it. But yeah, up until then, I'd tried to actually go out and have like a sober experience. And there's a really good pub in Brighton called The Rook, which opened last year, I think it was sometime. They had like an entire list of more than a dozen genuinely quality alcohol-free beers, and that was great for me. I was like, oh, that's great. As someone who's only kind of dipping my toes into it from that perspective, it was brilliant. Stands to reason that my experience is just a small drop in the ocean compared to what the rest of society's like. I'm sure there's plenty of folk who, that is their everyday, and I really, really appreciate having that as an option.
I guess as well, with fewer and fewer young people seemingly drinking much alcohol, like in the way that we would have done when we were youngsters, you're sort of future-proofing the business as well by taking that route with the alcohol-free stuff.
You'd like to think so, yeah. I think what's been important for us is making sure that we maintain a sense of diversity across the range. We've done a lot of work and development on our regular ABV beers. We're actually starting to sort of push the maxima of where we brewed historically upwards as well. Just, yeah, because I think for me, it's super important to make sure that you can cater yourselves to as many markets as possible. One of the big things that we really are keen to promote within that sense of well-being is the notion of community, the notion of togetherness. And, we want to make sure that whether people are coming to a venue like we have in Lewes, the Lewes Brew Cafe, or whether it's, drinking our product somewhere, or even just something like a tap takeover, that there's something somewhere for everyone in the range so people can enjoy our products together and let alcohol play that role of a social lubricator. Being in each other's company, vibing off each other's energy, frankly, is good for us. It's not just purely what we're putting into our systems, it's the social and almost the intangibles I think that we take for granted sometimes.
You mentioned there again, you're very good at this. I think you've done podcasting before. You mentioned the Brew Cafe. That's something I wanted to speak to you about because it sounds completely and only with love project, but it's more than a tap room, isn't it, essentially?
Sure. So, I think the first thing that an obvious difference is that it's in a community centre. It very much ticked a multiple level of boxes for us in terms of the brand's values and that sort of more altruistic set of things we want to achieve. Actually trying to make a difference, offer a space that becomes a catalyst for community. And community can be very, very diverse. We've got little groups, whether it's like a knitting group or a vinyl night or just simple things like little showcases of beers. But, just by virtue of existing, we've helped the community centre to actually become more regularly used. A lot of towns and cities now have got a Saturday morning park run. One of the preconditions for that is you've got to have a home cafe as like a base for, supplies and amenities and whatnot. And so, yeah, about a month or two ago, the Lewes Park Run began using our brew cafe as its hub. So that's brilliant. Just by virtue of being there and existing, we've helped to enable more things happening in our community. Still at fairly early days, only being a year in, but it's done a lot of good so far.
For anybody not familiar with Only With Love, your logo is a big thing, and the vibrant colours in your logo, which always stand out, don't they? When I saw you at the beer festival at Bristol, that huge blob of pink just leaps out of the scenery at you. I guess, all those colours, that vibrancy as well, that's all part of the Only With Love thing, isn't it?
It is, there's been a key mantra of, not trying to take ourselves too seriously. Often a lot of the craft beer industry can get very caught up in, being super, super serious and hyper analytic and almost a bit downcast with things a lot of the time, and a sense of melancholy, longing for what we haven't got anymore. But like so much of what we're trying to promote, it ties into the value set of positivity, fun, togetherness, things that as humans we want to actually kind of really align our souls to, really. And fun, bright colours help to signify that, but it's also a sense of intention there as well from a branding perspective. Again, you want to cut through the noise and help yourselves stand out. And solid luminous pink or a solid luminous yellow certainly catches the eye, particularly when it's on a sticker and it's covered like particular people. We've had a slight reputation for encouraging sticker bombing at the festivals we've done this summer, and it's been quite funny. Then kind of you get like 2/3 of the way through a session and suddenly you'll just see Only With Love logo absolutely everywhere. Yep. Sometimes there'll be more logo than human on certain individuals, which has been really funny to see.
I have seen this.
It just typifies and summarizes, that sense of just fun. Beer and having a good time, it's meant to be fun.
We try not to get bogged down with all that downcast stuff on our podcast, but there's no reason why it can't be fun, is there? I know these are people's businesses and livelihoods and everything, but essentially you drink beer to have fun.
Yeah. I think it's a key thing for any alcoholic beverage. I think it's partly where historically the UK has got it wrong with its relationship with alcohol. You often look at towards the rest of the world in terms of how people perceive alcohol. It's fundamentally a drug. So if you're actually using it responsibly and thinking of it as an enhancer to good times, you're actually going to be in a much better stead to work with it rather than it being sort of like in spite of the booze.
Sorry, Dave, I was going to say, have you cracked one of your beers yet?
I have cracked one. So you've opened the alcohol-free one. I've
finished it. I loved it.
Oh, you finished it? Oh, excellent. Well, I didn't bother with the alcohol-free one. I'm going to have that on another occasion. I've gone straight in for the alcohol. I've gone for Bongo Tropic IPA, 4.5%. And actually, I've been drinking it slowly while we've been talking, and mine has also nearly gone. And really,
there we go.
Really smooth. Not an ounce of bitterness in there, which I love. And when you've got, there's hops in there like Cascade, which I always think
bitter hop.
Yeah, but there's not an ounce of that bitterness. It's lovely and smooth and well balanced. It's beautiful.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm sure John, who has put a lot of work, particularly into this beer, will really appreciate you guys saying that. It's a funny one actually, because like Bongo as a product really does kind of symbolize the journey that we've been on in terms of recipe development in the past 12 months, because John has worked to really deconstruct every layer of it, treating each level of the ingredients as its own variable and tweaking each bit piece by piece. And then like most recently, since late November, December time, water profile has been his absolute pet project, just to kind of dial in every single layer of it. And it's funny, I never thought that I also would be getting stoked and hyped to talk about water, but yet here we are, because you're just the enthusiasm that John's put into working on this product, or to make it the ideal beer that he wants to drink. Like you said, soft, pillowy, really aromatic, very low bitterness, just be that perfect mid-range chugger.
Your place must be an amazing place to work. I get the idea everybody's walking around with big smiles on their faces. And
it does sound like it's unlike any other breweries I think we've spoken to so far, with this sort of emphasis on the well-being. And that's not to say other breweries don't look after their employees and share those kinds of things, but it's probably in the background rather than being front and centre like it is with you guys.
Every brewery is always going to have points where well-being sometimes does take a bit of a backseat in inadvertently, just because you're so up against it. It's been something we kind of laugh about. It's like, oh, cool, yeah, we're the well-being brewer and we're absolutely shattered right now. But I think a lot of that comes from what's often coined as growing pain. As a business that's still only really in its now fourth, 3 and a bit years of actual genuine trading, to see kind of where we're going and what we've been doing. The trajectory we've been on has been quite astounding, really, and just got to keep up with it at times.
What size is the brewery, to put it all into perspective?
I think at any given time, if we were to have all the tanks filled to the brim, we're about 29,000 litres. Most breweries were doing somewhere between sort of 20 to 30 hec. And then we very recently have brought in 2 new to us, but secondhand 60 hec tank to double brew Bongo and lager into. We're kind of at that kind of maximum point at where we're at right now with our current site, which is perhaps quite a nice segue to actually kind of let you guys know kind of what we're planning. We're in the very early stages of looking towards what the 2.0 of Only With Love is going to look like, from having had such a hectic summer where we were never able to keep up with demand, which was a great place to be, but stressful and strenuous nonetheless. We were like, okay, well, cool. If we can't do any more with our current location, we've got to really look to kind of what we want to do next. So, we're starting to put together plans to build a brand new brewery where we'll obviously be bigger in brew kit, use a new state-of-the-art equipment that can turn multiple brews potentially in a day. Hopefully have another venue on site as well, bring in some of our additional off-site pasteurization stuff into house, have more storage, just kind of build a venue that's going to be purpose-built for the next stage and many more years of Only With Love to come, hopefully. But it's, all very, very early stages at the moment. But what's been really cool is the guys who have been behind us, particularly some of the more recent folk who've come on to back our project, are totally on board with what we're doing and really want to see us succeed. So there's a real drive from everyone from top to bottom to make a real success long-term for Only With Love. A really, really exciting project to be a part of, really.
That sounds awesome. In terms of size and how much you brew, that's pretty big, really. In my mind, I didn't think you were that big.
Yeah, I mean, someone, I can't remember who it was, someone who's local to us in our Sussex network reckoned that we're probably in the top 4, top 5 for the actual amount of beer we're producing in Sussex. And, given the wealth of quality brewers we've got in our county.
You've got a lot of really good brewers in your area as well.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I know I was listening to some of your most recent podcasts and I heard you guys give a shout out to 3 Acre on one of your most recent episodes. Yeah. We share a wall with 3 Acre. They're literally on the same farm as us.
Right.
Which, it's a pleasant surprise to a lot of people, sometimes more than others at times where, oh, wow, you're literally next door. Even just down the road, obviously we've got our venue in Lewis, which plays host to Beak and Abyss. Got the old guys at Harvey's. Just up the road, you've got Burning Sky. And even if you kind of just go any direction into the rural areas, I could carry on listing breweries. Same down in Brighton on the coast as well. There's an absolute wealth of quality brewers, which has been brilliant because, it's created this amazing scene in Sussex that for a lot of pubs, they don't shop outside of the county because they're like, well, what's the need? We've got so much amazing product on our doorsteps. Like, why not support local? Brilliant as a from a consumer perspective, but a little bit tougher from a commercial standpoint.
I get the impression that with the beer industry, it probably helps to a certain extent having lots of you in sort of pockets of areas, probably unlike any other industry, really.
I think so, yeah, because you make a really good point there, Dave. Because, if you think about, if you had a hyper concentration of, in objective business terms, competition on your doorstep, a lot of people in other industries would find that very frightening, a threat. There would be a very standoffish attitude towards things, whereas, craft beer is a real testament to the industry and the people that were involved in the industry, that it's such a collaborative space. There's been like local collaborations, simple things like most recently our cask washer went kaput. And so I was able to pull in some favours from my friends at 360 to let us just go and spend an evening using their cask washer. And, it's like similar little things like we've lent our Linder machines to other breweries and vice versa.
We hear this a lot, but, it can't be many other industries like that. You hear about like ice cream wars, don't you? Like ice cream van, turf and all that sort of stuff. We don't seem to get that with beer.
No, I think there's a general consensus that the small little guy out the road isn't the enemy in the industry. There's much bigger players in the drinking industry, in the drinks industry, who are using their economic weight to try and suffocate the craft industry. So it's one of those ones where we've got way more in common with the friendly folk up the road who just want to make nice beer to enjoy versus the people who want to make it a race to the bottom and swamp out any competition.
Right, I have just opened my second beer, which is a collab with Staggeringly Good. Now, Staggeringly Good have this, to my eyes, this sort of fun persona. What with their huge Brecker sours, big, thick, ridiculous sours, that they've got this moniker of being a fun brewery. What was that like to brew with them? And where was it brewed? Was it brewed with you or with them? And how did it all come about?
Myself and one of my other colleagues at the brewery, Luke, Luke and I used to work together at 360 as well. So we've had a good relationship with Staggeringly Good's team for like a number of years. We've been both to the festival they used to run in Portsmouth called Warrior Fest for a couple of years, like whether we were pouring or just volunteering, and just had a really good relationship. First and foremost, we're friends. So that's kind of where this came from. I won't spill the beans on some of the stuff that the guys have got planned, but I know they got some really, really exciting stuff in the works for like new festivals down Portsmouth way. But yeah, they'd always been a brewery that I'd massively respect respected and appreciated, forgetting any personal relationship with, the guys over there. I propositioned it to them back in the spring and they were well up for the idea of doing it. And then when you kind of get to that stage of shooting the breeze over kind of what style and stuff you want to do, we were kind of just like, oh, well, John's had this idea of using New Zealand hops, which we've been using a lot via our contract with Freestyle, but in a completely different manner to how most people tend to see them. Like given the qualities and the aromatics of New Zealand hops, you tend to see them mainly in New England styles, really soft, juicy, pillowy, low bitterness.
Oh, yeah.
We were keen to do, and the guys were totally on board for doing this one. So we hosted the guys start of August at our brewery. We'll look to do a return collab. Remains to be seen what that will be, but that'll be some point next year.
And this is a West Coast IPA with New Zealand hops. Like you say, this is not how you see New Zealand hops being used usually. It's not what we're used to at all.
A lot of us in the brewery are big fans of more old school beers that have got a bit more depth and added layers of character, just by virtue of bringing bitterness into the equation. And we have a launch series of venues around sort of the country. By all accounts, it's gone down an absolute storm across everyone who's been part of that. So I think firstly, thank you to all the venues who helped us with that. Second, the Stags for being a part of it. But we're really chuffed with it because it's a really nice, different approach to showcasing what you can do with hops, and not just thinking, oh, well, this is like a New England hop, this is a West Coast hop. It's thinking, okay, when you're using hops at different stages of the brewing process, from even just any mash additions, all the way into your cold sides, but especially with a Westie, building layers through the boil, through the flame out, to really, really accentuate all the different flavors you could possibly pull from the hops. And certainly from my perspective, I'm thrilled to bits with it. And I know that the guys on the brewing floor are very, very proud of it as well.
There's a really lovely sweetness to it. I'm not a West Coast fan by any stretch. And when I see a beer that has got no haze at all, I sort of, what's all that about? But that is really lovely. That is lovely sweetness to it. So strange to see New Zealand hops being used in that way.
Yeah, I think it's one of the key things when it comes to craft in general. The key thing, I think, is to innovate and show different ways of thinking, and just to make people open their eyes a bit, think a bit more about what they're consuming, rather than it just being another hazy citra.
We have this conversation a lot, Dave, don't we? We've got to wade through all these hazy pales to find the really interesting stuff. It's easy to get weighed down in all those hazy pales, but when you find something different like this, it's really, really quite nice.
Yeah, so I think you sort of touched on it a bit, Ben, with certainly the business side of what's coming, hopefully, for Only With Love. What's sort of in the pipeline, maybe on a beery level? Have you got sort of specific things between now and the end of the year in the pipeline you can share, or?
Yeah. So we've recently welcomed the guys from Heist in Sheffield to come and do a beer with us. Last week we went and brewed with friends at Little Monster, sort of over in Chichester way. And then we've got collabs coming up with Vibrant Forest and Elusive. Yeah, more collabs kind of in the pipeline as well. That was kind of one of the things that we were really keen to start doing, is working with other people. I think it's really important to work together, to collaborate, to share ideas, but also when it comes to the commercial side, actually tap into one another's networks, because as I alluded to, Sussex is a fantastic scene, but it can be quite hard for folk to break into it. So I'd like to think that we can offer that to people to come and work and get a bit of a name out there in our network, but also for us as well. Aside from the collabs, it's just to keep on dialing things in, continue to innovate. We want to do some more fun dark beers and whatnot. We've got some really fun cask stuff in the works as well, like whether it's a green hop or a Christmas tree into a Christmas beer. There's a lot of fun stuff to look forward to, and then do it all again next year, because unlike others where January is a bit of a respite, we kick a whole alcohol-free market back into gear again. Yeah. So then we'll have a bunch of low ABV and non-alcoholic stuff already scheduled to come out for January. And then we'll just kind of see what happens. We want to do some more continental stuff. We recently did our first sour that went down an absolute storm. It was a blueberry and red currant sour called 3 Phase.
Very nice.
Some other. Oh yeah. You had a chance to try it at the festival, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, that was John's first attempt at doing a sour. And I can't honestly, I can't sing his praises enough. He's been an absolute star for us in terms of the work he's done. He's been a beer enthusiast that became a home brewer, and then has just tapped into just that natural enthusiasm and love of beer, and is now able to kind of transpose it into a commercial level. Thankfully, we're the benefits of it as a result.
It never ceases to amaze us the talent there is amongst the home brewer community. So many people we talk to have come that route and teaching themselves everything they know. It's staggering, really, how good some of these people are. Now, in a sea of positivity, which this conversation has been, for you, what has been your biggest challenge during your time only with love?
My biggest challenge probably been trying to actually live up to the promises that you make as a salesperson, particularly when it comes to having the volume. Like I touched on it a little bit where, we've had a fantastic summer, but, we've been super, super stretched all throughout. And so certainly my biggest challenge is, you in an ideal world, you've got a stockpile of your key flagship beers that you can just go at it and go at it and go at it and put on lines left, right and center. But, you've got to be super conscious that in that world of sales, it's all well and good promising the world, but you've got to deliver. It's all about like how you follow up the words that you promise people with. And yeah, that's probably been my personal biggest challenge. And it's purely because the business has been so successful with what it's done in terms of quality that people have wanted our product left, right and center. So, it's been each week, it's been a case of, okay, which beer's ahead of forecast this week? Which one am I going to have to throttle? Which one am I going to have to take off the list in the short term? Which, isn't ideal. As a salesperson, you want to be really going at it and building momentum continuously. But that's, very much like a personal challenge for me. Fundamentally, it's a testament to the good position that we're in as a business overall.
It's interesting to hear sort of personal challenges. We don't hear that sort of stuff very often. So what are you most looking forward to doing in the next sort of 12 months to 24 months?
I think just carrying on this journey. It's been brilliant to sort of be part of a company that's got the culture that it's got. There's so much that's going well for us. Given we're on this precipice of changing things up with a new site and the beer's getting further and further around the country, I'm excited to see where we go. In an ideal world, I'd love to be in a position where I'll go off and be in a random beer bar somewhere in Europe and find a beer that I've been part of putting there. That'll be a huge sense of pride and achievement for me, but also, for my colleagues as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm just looking forward to, is just being part of this journey. Ideally, we want to carry on putting the money that we're earning from our beer back into more community-led venues. Ideally, we want to build more brew cafes, whether that's from scratch or, upcycling an unloved space. See where we go. The sky's kind of the limit for us. And it's just, I've got a smile on my face as I'm talking about this because, I'm dead excited about kind of what we can do. So let's just see what happens, really.
This is the thing, I think, as Dave touched on earlier, this has been easily one of the most positive chats, if not the most positive chat we've probably had.
I have tried to ask a few negative questions, but there's no negative answers. I can't get any negativity out of you, which is really refreshing because people have got not a tale of woe, but they've got,
economic hardships and stuff.
Exactly. Right? Everybody's got those stories, but you guys seem so positive, and
I suppose you should be. If
exactly.
You're promoting well-being, it'd be very at odds if you came on and were sort of like, we're a well-being thing, but God, life's tough. So
coming on as as the representative of Only with Love and being here down in the doldrums, it doesn't quite work,
No, we're doing a great job anyway.
No, I appreciate it, and it's not been the first time I've had that feedback, and it's just it's a nice validation to hear that. I mean, you want for all the will in the world for everyone to be doing well in industry, but the reality is, as you say, not everyone does strike it, not necessarily as lucky, but gets all their ducks in a row. Thankfully, we're really well run and managed, and we have taken these multiple little internal projects just to watch our operational costs and push pricing up sensitively, but in the right places at the right times, just to actually make sure that from a business perspective we are commercially viable. It's all well and good creating the best products in the world, but if you're running at a loss, all you're going to do is run yourselves into the ground, and then there'll be no beer at all. So I think that's a super important thing to always bear in mind. It's still a business at the end of the day. You've got to make sure that the numbers stack up and everyone gets paid, the bills get paid, and you've still got money at the end of it.
Well, having met Ben in real life, I think the overwhelming sense is that you're very vibrant people, and the business is vibrant. It's doing well, and the future's bright by the looks of it.
One would hope. We don't want to rest on our laurels. We want to make sure that this is kind of just the latest stepping stone for us. But everything feels positive. Everything feels good, which it's not lost on me that I can be thankful to say that, because I know that a lot of folk are having it much harder at the minute.
Where's best to either drop you a line or just follow you generally?
Yeah, so obviously, in simple terms, most folk are obviously accessing the podcast through, a screen or a device. So Instagram's probably the best place to go for us. So we're at onlywith_love. Our website's obviously got a web shop where you can order all of our products online. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can read about in terms of the brand, not just its history, but its story, where it wants to go. There's been some really interesting publishing blogs on there regarding the work that's gone into the various alcohol-free products particularly. So yeah, there's a whole wealth of information that your listeners can tap into there, find out more about us.
Daft About Craft, the craft beer podcast.